Welcome to the Outlaw Radio Show. My name is Zach Adams, and I pastor a church located just outside of Athens, Georgia. The name of the church is Calvary 316. If you're local, and by local, I mean you live anywhere from, let's say, like Lawrenceville to Athens to the Oconee connector on Highway 316, come and hang out with us one Sunday morning. That area would include Bethlehem, Winder, Monroe, Carl, Auburn, a whole bunch of little towns. And but again, if you're local, if you know anything about what I'm talking about, hang out with us Sunday morning. Our service is at 10:30. If you're not local, we have a lot of people that join us online every Sunday morning. Our church is much larger than just within the walls of our building. So if you'd like to join us online, we live stream our service. Our YouTube channel, which is probably the best way for you to watch, is the quick link would be Calvary316.live, but we also stream on Facebook.com/Calvary316, so you can kind of join there as well. You can learn all about the church by going to Calvary316.com, and so I encourage you to check us out. I am joined, as always, by the man that needs no introduction, the maestro of this dysfunction, Pope Creighton Vaughn. How are you?
I am doing well. Hello, everybody.
Dude,
welcome to Outlaw Radio.
I got super excited today, and then had to remember how this all works and got disappointed. So today the conclave started.
Right.
We've been talking about this last couple of weeks. The Pope passed away. I didn't know that when they start the conclave, so much of this is secretive, but they take the Pope's signet ring and they like melt it down. And that means that his authority is gone and now they will choose another Pope. It could have just been an online,
who knows what actually goes on behind the doors?
Who really knows? But we do know. So today was the first day. So they have their votes. There's 133 cardinals officially. They need a 2/3 majority to pick a pope. They'll cast ballots. If the day closes and they have not picked the pope, they send out some smoke. Now today, it was black smoke. And that's where it was like, they picked Pope Creighton Vaughn. I was like, son of a gun, they did it. They picked a black pope, and he's my friend. And then I remembered that the black smoke meant that they hadn't chosen a pope. Mm-hmm. And white smoke indicates, right, that they have, because there's been so many popes of different skin color, Let's do white.
The chance of there being a black pope is very small. I think I did see that there was one in the running, a black cardinal. Who was in the running?
His last name's Sarah.
Gotcha.
Which interesting.
I saw that there was both a black and an Asian cardinal in the running, which is neat.
The Asian one. Now, so here's the thing. The Asian one is like Pope Francis on steroids, like super LGBTQ, super liberal, he's Filipino, I believe. And like all of the people that I follow online are like, absolutely not. This guy cannot be the Pope. That would be terrible, etc. So the Filipino option, people are really not
on board.
Yeah, but all these conservative Catholics, traditional Catholics, are totally on the Sarah. His last name's Sarah. He's an African. He's super conservative, kind of a throwback. But what's crazy is he turns 80 in June, so he's like months away from not being able to qualify, but would fit that like interesting category of like, well, I guess he could still be considered Pope, but he couldn't vote.
What would happen? Can he be chosen Pope after crossing that can't vote threshold?
Any
okay, so I was going to say, what happens if the conclave goes longer than his eligibility to be?
Well, he wouldn't be able to vote at some point.
Right, but he would still be able to be chosen as a cardinal.
To my understanding, anybody can be chosen to be Pope as long as you're a baptized Roman Catholic male. So you could be 98 years old and they could pick you to be Pope.
Well, I am baptized. I am a male, not Roman Catholic.
Not Roman Catholic.
Darn.
Hey, joined also, as always, Dear Daddy. I like the hat. Make diesel cheap again.
Yeah, it's one of my favorites.
That's a good one. Yeah. And Spice Daddy.
Just got through filming some my next list of pepper poppers.
Okay, so what's the topic? I think we kind of threw out some ideas last week.
I decided to go with my top 10 Christian books this time.
All right.
Our book series.
So how will these be released?
I believe two books each.
So we'll throw it to the producer.
yeah, so
You're just the talent. You're
Yeah,
not.
I
You're
am.
not the,
That's
you're
not
not the
me.
guy behind
Yes.
the scenes.
So we're going to be doing 2 books an episode, 1 episode a week, next 5 weeks.
So
that
they're
we'll have an
roughly
episode every-
how long are the episodes? You think?
Probably 6-7 minutes.
Okay, so it's just
Yeah.
nice little
It's
feeders.
a nice, you're brushing your teeth, you want to watch something, perfect.
or maybe you need some. You haven't read a good book in a while, and maybe there's one on the
Absolutely.
list, or maybe your kid. You need some suggestions for some kids books. or
Do you
some
wait?
kids-
I got it. Do you watch YouTube videos when you're brushing your teeth?
That is a good
Do
question.
you not watch YouTube videos? Yes, I watch YouTube videos when I'm brushing my teeth.
No, absolutely not.
Yes,
do
I
I
absolutely
watch
YouTube videos when I'm brushing my teeth.
Do you watch YouTube videos in the shower?
No, but sometimes I'll listen to a book while I'm showering. I'll just turn on a book on my phone and put it so that I
And
can hear it
loud
in the
enough
shower.
where you
Yeah.
can hear it.
And I'll listen to a book in the shower every now and then.
Okay.
Depends on how engrossed I am in the book.
All right, dear
But,
Daddy,
yeah,
you
sometimes.
have a whole nother world outside Outlaw Radio.
I do.
Creighton, not so much. Spice Daddy, myself, we are what we are. But I mean, you are an internet sensation.
That's not a good thing.
So tell us what you've been up to.
We've been filming a bunch of YouTube content for Review Diesel, and
So this is a website you're launching where you're reviewing diesel parts.
yep.
So like good reviews, bad reviews.
We don't do bad reviews. We only do good reviews.
Okay, so you're not throwing people under the bus.
Yeah, I don't want to bash anybody, but there's a lot of really good marketing for really, really terrible parts, and I'm just combating that really good marketing to make sure they don't get the
So it's a
limelight.
positive review.
Yeah,
It's-
yeah.
It's the idea is like, hey, these are good parts. You can rely on. Them.
There's 50,000 people making these. This is the best one. So,
Gotcha.
So yeah, we keep it positive. But yeah, same thing. 7 to 9 minutes, just reviewing.
And
what
like
makes the
all
parts
weekend,
good.
you've been filming, so you're coming in tired.
I have not slept since last Thursday. So yeah.
People don't realize how much work it goes into being an influencer like
No.
yourself.
Yeah, I highly do not recommend it. I would rather just have a normal job.
Actually, you had one of those for a little while.
Yeah, I did.
And now you're doing this
Yeah.
by your own decisions.
Well, it was by God's decisions. I'm
Now,
just,
I
just following.
I did want to bring up something because we were talking before the show, and again, you're telling a funny story, but I think that there's actually kind of not a point to be like overly dogmatic, but there's there's an influential idea, something worth bringing up. So you have a bunch of guys have come in, they're filming, not believers.
yeah.
They know you're a Christian.
Yep.
But they're here for a very short amount of time. You guys are trying to pound out content. And so they were really pushy about like, hey, we're in town. Let's like they pushed you for Sunday morning. I know your wife came to church, your mother-in-law,
Yeah.
but you were like, I gotta stay home and film stuff. But the whole time you're like, this is not good. We should not be here.
Yeah, it
Tell
was
this
just-
story. This is a funny story.
So I mean, I pray for a lot of conviction every day. I pray that the Holy Spirit guides my life, guides my tongue, guides my actions, guides my works, and shines through me. And so, wake up Sunday morning, no different than any other day. And I just had a very heavy conviction that I should go to church. And kind of, I tossed the idea out there and was met with absolutely not. We have a lot of work to do, and we both flew into town, and it was expensive, and that I got exactly what I knew I was going to get. And so I stayed home from church. And
you can go to church next week.
Yes, and I stayed home from church, and we tried filming a couple of YouTube videos, and just everything that could go wrong was going wrong. The two guys that were, one's producing, one's filming and editing, and they were just arguing back and forth, and I'm just kind of sitting there like this. I knew it. I should have gone to church. Like, should have honored the day of rest, and I didn't.
And you're actually telling them this, like,
Yeah.
this is all against us because
Yes.
of you knuckleheads and me
and they're
not
like-
following my conviction.
They're like, no, that's not it. It's that. And so we did this like 3.5 hour film session to get one video. And then one of the guys was reformatting a card to put it in another camera, and he erased the whole thing. And I was like, I told you guys, like, there's something here. And,
we should have been honoring the Lord and gone to church.
And so this morning, an issue came up, and my buddy Danny, Danny's just battling it and looking for other answers. And so this morning, a big issue came up, and I was like, look, man, I'm telling you, this is God Like God's telling us what to do, and we need to honor God with this, and we're not honoring God with this decision and the way that this is being done. And he's like, "You're right. I'm gonna honor God, and we're gonna do it this way." So we're getting through.
You're getting through it.
We're getting through.
Yeah. So we dropped a video, I think last maybe Friday or so, where I think you took and spliced together some stuff from Vinny sharing that story last week about the bus, and I think what did you title it? Being a Witness, something like that?
Yeah, I titled it Being a Witness because that's what we were talking about, was that you shine your light kind of regardless whether you want to or not.
Hopefully.
And that's what we talked about that episode, and that's what the meat of that video is. And then I had the spliced video of him actually in the bus with the guy as he's hitting the gas the first time, and you can see on his face that it really does. And one of the things I thought was interesting was that he was like, "Oh, I've seen you guys' videos. Like I've watched them, and I thought people were putting on an act, but no, this is like totally different."
Yeah.
Which is really neat. It was cool.
So, just pivoting on that idea about being a witness, again, we talk about like witnessing is something that you are versus something that you do. You are a witness. And so like when people talk about like, I don't witness enough or whatever, it's like, well, that reveals a complete misconception of what this is. The question one should ask, if you're a Christian, if you're a follower of Jesus, it's not whether or not you're witnessing. It's what you're witnessing. It's, what are you articulating? What are you communicating? Like you are a witness all the time, regardless. And so it's not, are you witnessing? It's what kind of witness are you? And that's a challenge as a Christian. And again, but if we get out of the mindset of like, I got to tell somebody about this or this, that, and the other, it's like, just be. Again, they're be attitudes, not do attitudes. The Christian experience is about being transformed, being something different, being, again, Jesus would say, that we're to be salt and light. Salt is something that you experience. It's something that you taste. Yes, it's a preservative, but it's something that like salt's meaningless without it being used, whether it's salting meat to preserve or to add taste. It's an experience. We're to be an experience, that people are to understand our relationship with God through an experience that they have individually with us. And then light, light, there's not a substance, but it can be felt, it's seen, it's useful. And so, Jesus said you can be salt and light. He didn't say be a hammer and a chainsaw. It's again, in a modern sense, he can say be salt, be light, be cologne. Like there's an experience, a fragrance, an aroma.
Don't be a clanging cymbal.
Or a clanging cymbal, yeah, for sure. I want to, we mentioned Justin's doing a bunch of book reviews. I've been on a Gene Edwards kick. I've made a reference recently to A Tale of Three Kings. My buddy Randy sent me a picture the other day, said next on the reading list. I didn't know this until very recently, but Gene Edwards actually wrote other books as well. And this book, The Prisoner in the Third Cell, I read on Friday. It'll take you an hour. It's very quick. It's very similar in style to A Tale of Three Kings, such as its dialogue. It could easily be translated or put within like a theatrical performance. It reads like it's a play. Just to give you a little taste, I'm not going to read the whole chapter because I don't want to take that much time to do it, but just to give you kind of a taste of what the book is about. And again, it's The Prisoner in the Third Cell, and then the subtitle is Will You Follow a God Who Does Not Live Up to Your Expectations? And it's about John the Baptist. And it kind of goes through John's story, his backstory, just a really creative presentation of John the Baptist. So there's a section towards the end of the book. John has been arrested. He's been thrown into jail by Herod. Salome dances this seductive dance. Herodias, her mother, they use this whole scenario to get Herod, who's afraid of John, to have John executed. Like he offers Salome anything up to half the kingdom, and she says, I want John's head on a platter. So John's in prison against the prisoner in the third cell. Spoiler, it's John the Baptist. And this is Jesus, so this is the voice here is Jesus speaking to John, although not directly. It's more of kind of this creative observation from Jesus. And again, this is the end of the chapter. But it reads, they have opened the gate to the courtyard. There it is, the block on which you will lay your head. And there the man who will take your life. You'll be remembered as one of the greatest men who ever lived. But you will not know that. Nor will you hear the Son of God say, of men born of women, there was none greater than John. Even now as you kneel, you wonder if you are a complete failure. You gave so much, poured out your life so completely, lived for God so singularly. Yet despite all of this, you could not so much as win the favor of God to the point of his giving you one answer to one question. It was, after all, the only request you ever made. I did not give you an answer. I never have. The question of why always remains unanswered in my dealings with men. This is my way. But if there was one human being on earth to whom I would make clear my purpose, it would be you, and it would be now. Above all other men or women who have ever lived, I would give you an answer. John knelt and placed his head upon the block. When I called you John and told you that you would be announcing the coming of the Messiah, you assumed that because you were going to prepare the way for me, you would have the joy of seeing that wonderful day of my coming in glory. But today, you have met a God you do not understand. Such is the mystery of my sovereignty. Such are my ways in every generation. No man has ever understood me, not fully. No man ever will. I will always be something other than what men expect me to be. I will work out my will in ways different from what men foresee. The guard has shifted his weight. The blade is raised above you. Death stands beside you. Die, my brother John, in the presence of a God who did not live up to your expectations. And blessed are you if you are not offended with me. So the book is, at its core, it's what do you do when Jesus doesn't meet out your expectations? And what does that mean? It means that like we all have certain thoughts about how our life, even our life in Christ, should work out, how it should play out, how we should be used by God, how what the life should look like following Jesus. But if you look at the life of John the Baptist, here's a guy that was called from the womb. He grew up in a priestly home. He spent his formative years in the desert. He made sacrifices. He didn't know a wife. He had no friends. He had no earthly pleasures. We're told that when he came onto the scene, he was eating locusts. He was dressed in camel's hair, which was an unclean animal. He spent his whole life serving Jesus. And then even when Jesus became popular, John took the back seat. John forgoed any type of recognition. And how does his story ultimately end? Like he prepares the way for Jesus, but he doesn't see Jesus in glory on the triumphal entry. He doesn't see Jesus at the cross or the resurrection. He doesn't see really much of even Jesus's miracles because they're separated. John spends his life dedicated to Jesus. And how does his story end? Well, he doesn't see anything. He asks through his disciples if Jesus was the Messiah or if he should be waiting for another. And Jesus says, well, hey, report back to John all the things you see, but then let him know, blessed is this man that's not offended by me. And John doesn't really even get his question answered. Jesus doesn't give him the why. He just points more to the who. This is who I am, what I'm doing. You got to trust that I have a sovereign plan. And then a teenager goes into a party with a bunch of old men and dances a suggestive dance and requests that this man of God die. That's the irony, like the irony. And he dies. John the Baptist dies not seeing or knowing anything. Jesus would say, upon hearing the news that he died, no man is greater. There's never been a greater man or prophet than John the Baptist, but he had never heard those words. You know, so what happens when like your walk with God doesn't play itself out the way that you expect it to be? What do you do when Jesus doesn't fit your expectations or how you think your life should work out? That's such a heavy thought. It's a man. I'll tell you, I read it and it's just the challenge of like, I think everybody goes into their walk with God or goes into their service of God with lofty goals, like our own human lofty goals, our own human expectations of how we think best for God to use us and our talent and our ability. You know, you look around and you think, man, I would love to be used by God like a Moses or like an Abraham or, you know, these great big tales. But then you never go into it like, I want to be Jeremiah. I want to serve God faithfully for 40 years in the midst of terrible persecution and have 0 converts. And then, you know, my last living legacy is a book called Lamentations, and I'm known forever as the weeping prophet, the crybaby prophet. You think, you know, I'd love to be the Apostle Paul without thinking through how his life ended, or Peter's, or John's.
You even look at like Moses, who we view as great. Look how his life ended. Didn't get to see the promised land.
He saw it. He just couldn't enter it.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. Like,
yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, but again, like, what do you do? I think within the old covenant model, there's maybe a little less of this because there's, again, we're before the dispensation of grace and the Holy Spirit. There's some parsing. But like, again, you know, I go back to my own story. Like if you give your life to Jesus, like I'll tell you this, if you had asked me late November of 2021, Zach, do you want to be used by God in a way that you've never been used by God before? Like in a powerful way where people, like more people will know your name than ever before. I'd be like, yeah. Like, do you want like your life? Can I use your life? I mean, to transcend like making an impact even within your congregation, but like impacting people on a scale that you won't even know about until you get to the halls of heaven. I'd be like, yeah, sign me up. He's like, all right, so here's the plan. You're going to die. The next year and a half of your life is going to be the most intense trial you could ever imagine. Not just for you, your family, everyone around you. Like, you know, if Jesus came to you up front, you'd be like, you know, how about like a lesser role? Like maybe I'm good with the small impact I'm making.
One of my favorite verses in the Bible, and I'm not going to say it perfectly, but it's when God is talking to Ananias about Saul. And Ananias is like, you want me to go talk to who? Like, you know, this guy wants to kill
Ananias
Christians.
is a faithful disciple at the church in Damascus, which is where Saul's going to persecute the church. Saul's had this encounter on the road to Damascus. He meets Jesus. He's blind in Damascus, and God has told Saul, wait, I'm going to send a bro. And then God goes to the bro named
Ananias.
So that's the backstory that's helpful for the story.
Yeah, I assume people,
Don't ever assume people know.
Right. So God comes to Ananias, and Ananias is like, you want me to go to who? You know that he's here to like kill me specifically, right? Like people like me. And God's like, yeah. You're going to do this, and I'm going to send Saul in front of kings, princes, and the world, and I will show him all of the things he must suffer for my name's sake. I think about that verse all of the time because Paul is doing all of the things he was doing before, you know, in pursuit of God. And God's like, no. Now I'm going to show you what you're going to have to do in my name's sake.
It's wild.
And you don't know what's coming.
It's wild.
It's awesome.
But again, the challenge, man, I never really thought of John the Baptist that way of like, what do you do? You know, so often it's like, man, I know I fall short of God's expectation, which is the irony is I don't think he has too lofty of expectations for us.
He knows us too well.
We are but clay. but like we do, I think had this like I want to live up to the standard of all that God has given, all that God has done, you know. And I think that's a good thing. I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that there's an appropriate element to like the reality of like the fact that God made me and then Jesus died on the cross to redeem me so I could have life and that more abundantly should add a weight to how I live my life. You guys would agree with that?
Absolutely.
But we never think of it in the other way of like my expectation for God. And what do I do when God doesn't meet my expectation? I was so just encouraged, challenged, punched in the nose, you know, just reminded. I highly recommend, again, Gene Edwards, prisoner in the third cell. Highly recommend. So I had a day. I had an interesting day. None of you know this at all because I intentionally kept it back. So about a month and a half ago, month or so ago, a sister in our church ended up going to the hospital. Wasn't feeling good. Shortness of breath. Didn't go to the ICU, but just went to the hospital. Was there for a few days, getting some breathing treatments, just checking some things out. She had a year before, several months before, come out of cancer. I think that the conclusion was she was probably still having some residual effects from the chemotherapy. God was good. But our brother let me know what was going on. And I was like, I need to go. You dropped your bottle. You need to go visit her in the hospital. I had been in case you're just watching this for the first time, in 2022, the first 5 months of 2022, I experienced a significant health trial, laid me in the ICU for 10 weeks. I was in a coma for over a month, ventilated for 65 days. I got COVID. It was bad. It was a whole thing. We'll get to a little bit of it. But I spent 10 weeks in an ICU. I spent like 2 days in an emergency room. Don't remember that at all. And don't remember a lot in the ICU, but I was there for a long time. ICU is a thing. So like I've gone to like an outpatient thing to visit. Like my mom had some vertigo a year and a half ago. So I went and kind of visited her, with her, sat with her. That was kind of the first time I had been back in the doors of a hospital. I had no interest in going back to a hospital. And then our sister was in like admitted to the hospital room. So that was like the first big step. And even our brother was like, I didn't even think about that. And I was like, I need to get over this. Love you guys. I'm going to be here. Well, I got into the office this morning, opened up my computer, was going to start working on some Bible studies for Sunday, some studying for Sunday, and boom, my phone, I got a text from a really dear friend of mine. You guys don't know him, so we'll just leave that off to the side. I don't want to mention the identity of this person. But just a real good friend. Him and his family have been super, super kind to Jessica and I over the years. He's taking care of my animals. He's just a really good brother. Even back when I was like doing Bible class ministry, would support us with that. And Creighton, you know who I'm talking about. So
yeah, I think I figured
you're over there nodding your head, trying
to figure out who it is.
You're being real distracting over there.
My bad.
Pope Creighton. Anyway, so I get a text that his wife's mom, so his mother-in-law, who's very elderly, she lives in assisted living, but she had fallen and hit her head and was having a brain hemorrhage and was in the ICU at this hospital up in Forsyth. And so I get this text, and like I immediately, my snap reaction is to shoot a text back. And it was like, I got halfway into crafting the text. I was like, that's stupid. I called him immediately. I'm not going to communicate with him via text with this. He immediately answered the phone. Him and his wife were in the hospital room. Kathy is her name, was laying there, basically treating for pain. So she was doped out of her mind, had no cognitive awareness of what was going on. But I was able to pray with them. Just put me on speakerphone, was able to pray with them. And I'm not even kidding. Towards the end of it, like the Lord is in the middle of my prayer talking to me in that back voice and saying, you need to go to the hospital and you need to do this in person. And like, again, as I'm praying, I'm having another conversation. Like, no, I'm not going to do that. Like, that's the ICU. Like, I'm not going to go back into an ICU. And in my mind, I was almost like over my dead body, and I stopped myself because been there, done that, not doing that again. And so I closed out the prayer, and I asked my friend, I said, hey, I'm not really versed on hospital protocols because the ICU is different. I said, I know I'm clergy, that gives me special access, but would you be okay if I came? And dude, he lit up, was like, that would be such a blessing. I was like, all right, man, I'm going to jump in the shower. I'm going to be there about an hour and a half because it's quite a ways from where we live. And then even in the shower, the Lord was like, you know what? You need to bring a vial of oil and you need to anoint her with oil and you need to pray over her soul. And no matter what happens, like this is like, you have a sensitivity to this. You know what this is like. You're going into this worried about PTSD, but there's like, you're good. You'll be good. So I drove up and went through the hospital. Got up to the ICU doors that were closed, and I asked this nurse. She goes, "Oh, they're doing rounds," and like immediately I was like, "Oh!" like to hear that name. She goes, "Oh, but you can get in, hit this button." So she got me in, and I walked back, and I was really worried about the smells, sights, sounds, beepings, those type of things. Again, if you've ever been in the hospital for a long period of time. My first night home was hard to sleep because I didn't have any of the sounds. It's real weird, the auditory aspects, because you can't move. So you're only kind of processing your reality from the sounds around you. I could never see the monitors. They were always behind me because they were never good. And then I had the sounds of the ventilation machine and all those things were at play. So I walk into the room. I give them both a big hug. My friend and his wife. Their son shows up soon after, who I'd actually never met, and I gave him a hug. I knew so much about him, and immediately my friend goes, "I didn't think about this at all. Are you dealing with PTSD? Because I could totally imagine it. I didn't even think about it. I would have probably, if I had thought about it, said no, don't come." I said, you know what? I'm good. Like the Lord is good. Like I'm this is what I'm called. This is where I'm called to be. And you know what? I love you guys. And you need to know that A, you're not alone. And B, like my job as a pastor is I reflect more than myself. Like I'm to be the Lord's instrument. Like I'm his representative here. Like that's the idea. And I brought oil. I want to pray over your mom and lay hands on her. And then the doctor came in. So I kind of stepped out because, which when the doctor left, I stepped back in and my friend was like, "You didn't need to leave." I was like, "Oh, I listened." He was like, "No, you could have stayed in here." I was like, "But heavy things were being said." And it was very touching. It was very like, again, I wasn't there for me, but the Lord used it for me, I guess, in some ways. What did throw me, the moments that I did have, I had minor PTSD and I actually brought it up. We talked about it and actually all kind of shared a laugh. So when you're in the ICU, under all of your bedding, there's this blue tarp that's underneath everything. And it's not for fluids. There's carabiners at the end of it. And if you look up in the ceiling, there's these tracks that run with this cross beam. And it's a lift so that if they need to pick you up out of the bed, they can. And so that blue tarp, the lift will come over you and they snap it. And that's how they can pick you up out of bed. And so for me, I'm fully awake. And then the other thing was the chair. All hospitals have the same crappy recliner. That and most people, if you've ever been, you've slept in one, it's terrible. If you've lost most of all your body fat, sitting in one is equally brutal. But I needed to gain strength in my diaphragm, so they needed to get me out of bed a lot. I hated it because I couldn't physically get out of bed. So they would bring this machine over me, they would hook it up, and they would pick me up. So imagine this blue tarp with a pulley system picking me up, and then it would rotate over, and they would lower it and get me into bed. Well, Jessica, she started laughing one day. Have you ever seen the movie Free Willy?
Yeah.
Right? So there's a scene where they have to transport the orca from one pond to another, and it's like this blue tarp that they use a crane. That's exactly what I looked like. And so they called it, even the nurses started calling it the Free Willy. So, you know, we got a Free Willy Zach today. And so they'd pick me up and slide me over. Those were the two things when I wasn't, because they had turned off the monitor so you couldn't hear them. But anyway, I say all that to say, like, I had a day where I went into the hospital, and this lady is dying. It's not good. And we prayed for a miracle, and I reminded everyone that there will be a miracle. And that miracle either happens in like this physical context where she jumps out of bed and is like healed, which could totally happen. They're kind of waiting to see how she's going to respond to figure that out. I mean, she's a severe brain bleed when you're on blood thinners and they can't do surgery. It's just a bad spot. And she's lived a great life, run a great race, godly lady. She knows where she's going, and the family does. There's a piece there. But like like the whole scene. The other miracle, she goes to heaven. Like that's a miracle, resurrection to life. But the whole thing, again, I had not been back into an ICU, like, and it got me driving home a little bit up in my feels, just in the sense of like I've been there, and like not just been there, but like she was laying there with her mouth open, and so they had put lip balm on her, and she would smack her lips, and she was dry. Like I remember all of that. Like I remember like the few pictures I've seen have me like in that same pose, and just looking at her just reminded me of how close to dying I was. And without going into my story, I really died probably in some regard, but didn't in other regard. And again, the experience of today, I really had no idea what we were going to do with Outlaw Radio this morning. Before I came into the office, I had one idea, and then by the time I got home, I had a totally different thing I wanted to talk about. Because and Creighton, I kind of preface this by saying like I have some thoughts. I don't know exactly how they're all going to weave together. So this will be a back deck cigar style conversation amongst friends where we're talking about the Lord, and it's like, hey, I have a thought. What do you guys think of this? So like even tonight, you're going to join the conversation. I'm working out an idea, a thought. These guys are going to walk it with me. If you want to jump into the conversation, you can. You don't have to. It's not a big thing with the show, but we are live. So Spice Daddy's monitoring X. Creighton is monitoring, I believe, YouTube. Dear Daddy will be periodically pinging back to Facebook. If you want to join in, great. If not, no big deal. You can always drop us an email at popecreighton@gmail.com at any point, even if you're listening to this after the fact. Again, way into my feels, thinking about death. I think the word death is an absolutely misleading term. So this is my idea I want to work out here. I think when we say death or dying, died, that we're using, yes, biblical terminology, but we are using it in a way that lacks actual true defined meaning. Okay, so this is where we're going to go on some threads here and kind of get wonky. Creighton, you already kind of perked your eyes up a little.
Yeah, I think I know where you're going with this. I'm not 100%, but I think I know where you're going with this.
Okay. So this has been a thought. This has been something percolating for a while. So a couple months ago, we had this whole deal about alcohol, the fact that I don't see any problems drinking alcohol, and that created a schism between me and my place within the Calvary Chapel movement, or a part of the Calvary Chapel movement, so that I was de-affiliated over my positions concerning alcohol and its place within the church. That's fine. That's not the conversation. I had a call with a pastor I greatly respect about everything that was going on, and we were talking about the topic. And again, I knew up front, like, I'm not going to convince him of my position, and he's not going to really convince me of his position. Although the position that he took about one particular topic blew my mind. It was incredibly disappointing because I'm thinking that I'd never heard that before. So I brought up, like, Jesus, like, if alcohol was such a terrible thing, like, what about Jesus, his first miracle being transforming water into wine at a wedding? And you can't tell me that it's grape juice because, like, even that doesn't even fit within the text, because, like, the host of the party is blown away and comes out and says, hey, you typically send out the best stuff at the beginning of the wedding when everyone's having their first few drinks. And then when everyone's feeling real good, you bring in the weaker stuff because they're not going to be able to tell the difference. But you've done the opposite, because they had, this is the wedding of Canaan. They ran out of wine. Mary's throwing this wedding. So she comes to Jesus, who's in attendance, and she's like, you got to do something about this because we're in a tough spot. This would be a terrible blight on the host. I'm coordinating. This would be bad. Can't run out of wine at a wedding. And so Jesus takes these ceremonial clay pots that are filled with water for hand washing, foot washing, ceremonial stuff. These kind of a religious deal. And he says, draw water out of them. And in the process, it becomes wine. He transformed this water into wine. So many layers of meaning. Jesus making some big points about old covenant, new covenant. We're not getting into all of that. But so I brought this up, and I was like, clearly this was like the wine was alcohol. The entire idea of everyone drinking alcohol, or at least a measure of alcohol in the ancient culture, because the water was so bad, means that you need the alcohol content for purification. Like, that's the idea. It's like you need alcohol because you're dealing with worms, and like alcohol is a sterilant, like it sterilizes. And so people would add alcohol to almost everything they drank because it killed bacteria, it killed things, and thus was good for your digestive tract. That's why Paul would recommend to Timothy, like, hey, drink some wine for your stomach. Like, again, he wasn't giving him permission to drink because he was somehow not drinking. He was giving like some medical advice of like, hey, like drinking's a good thing for an upset stomach. Anyway, so I bring this up about Jesus, the water, and the wine, and this guy goes on this, it wasn't a rant, but he started talking about how, like, well, what Jesus did there he didn't make it alcohol like we think of alcohol. It was a heavenly substance, unlike anything we would ever have, because because alcohol needs death and decay. But Jesus says, I won't drink of the cup till heaven, but we can't have death and decay in heaven. So obviously, this is a supernatural substance. He's not making it wine like we think of wine. He didn't make it a Merlot. It's some heavenly substance that just kind of came across. Because, and again, the argument is that fermentation, death, decay. And he even said, like, before the fall, you would have never had this because you physiologically couldn't have made this. So I've been thinking about that for a while. And that leads me to this thought that, like, I don't think when we talk about death, we're talking about the same thing. So no doubt from the biblical standpoint, God told Adam, don't eat of this fruit. And you guys can jump in with questions at any point you want to. Because again, I'm working some thoughts out. So if you want to jump in, don't ever hesitate. But the idea of death gets introduced in the context of man, created in the image and likeness of God. God comes to Adam and says, don't eat this fruit. Why? Because the day you do, you're going to die. Now, ironically, Adam ate the fruit. Did he die?
Eventually.
I would say yes. No, he died right then. But we convolute the definition of what death is. For example, before the fall, and here's the question we can chat about. Before the fall, because my friend would make the argument that nothing decayed So how in the world does the basic biology of plant life even exist without any type of decay?
The moment they ingested any of the fruits,
They
Right.
pooped.
What does it mean for decay? If you're eating fruit, then you're eating dead plant cells.
Exactly. And then you're putting them out into fecal matter
Right.
that then produces the right conditions for seed and new life.
Right.
So, like this idea of, again, to borrow the term, which we're going to work against, death, decay, life cycles. We know within the plant life structure, the strata, what's the technical term for that?
Genus? Species?
Genus.
What are you asking? I'm not
Genus.
sure.
No, genus is the right word. The big macro idea. Genus.
Yes.
Because you wouldn't say species. Although I guess there are species of plants, but
Yeah, the word that you're looking for would be taxon.
see, I knew you would geek out enough
it's
to
the
give me some
pla-
biology.
It's the plant taxon is
Okay.
that you're asking. Yeah.
So things were eaten, processed, dead. Like there is decay. There's yeast in the way this all interacts. This is all before, quote, sin, because the Bible says that sin brought in death, meaning that there couldn't be death before Adam sinned. And yet we see natural biological processes that we call death, but that's a false equivalency. That's not death.
I mean, there is the idea that like fungi are nature's janitors. They live on death. All fungi they clean up everything.
So they'd have to exist.
They would have to have existed in creation at some point and be somewhere in the creation, unless they were created during the thorns and thistles curse, which I don't agree with. Which means that things would have had to physically die.
The only thing creating the thorns and thistles curse was viruses. I heard a great Bible study about that last year, the year before. I don't even know where you can go.
I'm not sure where you could find that either. But yeah, viruses definitely work.
So
Fungi they eat death. That's what they do.
okay, well again, and we're using the word death and it's common sense. My exhortation is I want to try to like really challenge that idea because I think we convolute something.
So is the idea that you're going for the difference between bodily death and spiritual death?
No, not necessarily. I just want to challenge the idea of death.
my question,
Because
is,
we apply death universally, and I think that that's the wrong way theologically.
so my question would then be
Because death is given a biblical idea.
right, which leads to my
Yes.
question. And
I hope you guys are enjoying this.
yeah. So my question then would be: is there a different term used? Because English does not fully encompass half the words that are used in the Bible and in the original language.
Well, no. The Bible was written in English. I don't know what version you have.
Oh, if King James English
you
is
not
good enough
seen
for
them?
Jesus, is good enough for me.
Right.
so.
Have you not seen Jesus' movie?
Right.
English.
So was there, and this pure question, not being facetious or anything, is there a different Hebrew word for death used for plants, plant matter, and fauna, animal, and
Okay.
human?
So I preface this by saying we're going to work out an idea together. So such a great question would require research, of which I have not done at all. So if you want to,
that's why I was.
you have all
I have
the
blue
world.
I have Blue Letter Bible,
And you
which-
have the whole world's information in your hand. So why don't you actually work on answering? It's a good question.
Right,
Answer
yes.
that. Let me add another question. Let's like take it beyond plants, which I would say would be a dichotomy, moncotomy, like just it's physical. Is it in plants and then animals have a conscience? Like again, we dichotomy, trichotomy. Anyway, so let's get to one. I don't know. What about animals? So your animal, your dog. You obviously we said my dog died. Then you've had a few. I have. My dog died. What happens to your dog? Truth be told, the dog, you take it in the backyard, you dig a hole, you bury it, and that body decays, becomes pretty fertile soil at some point. A lot of things happen down in there. And that soil is fertile enough for not another dog to come out of it. But it contributes to the circle of life, right? The dog doesn't go to heaven.
Plant a dogwood tree over it.
Dogwood tree. Right. That's a good one.
I did that for Creighton.
This is a question to further my research.
Okay.
I did that.
So I went to Genesis chapter 3, the fall,
Okay.
where you see the word "you shall surely die." There's a specific word used.
Justin's going to blow up the whole conversation.
I am.
I think so.
The immediate reference that I see that could be is when Jesus curses the fig tree, and it immediately dies. Where's that at?
Okay, well, that would
Mount
be...
of Olives.
It would be, I'd say later
Mark?
chapters of Matthew.
Matthew?
It's in a few places, but it's towards the end because Jesus is making his way back and forth. This is during the week of Passion.
Okay.
The challenge with that, though, is that you are going to go from Hebrew to Greek.
Greek, but it should be along the
Matthew-
same definition.
Maybe not.
Or Mark 11 or Matthew 21.
So an animal dies. And again, somebody could accuse me of semantics. I'm going to go somewhere with this because I don't think it's semantics. So Kaya, my dog,
Great dog.
had her for 14 years, loved her to death. She died. And we took her to the vet. Dr. Mike, my brother, we walked her in, laid her there. He got her ready. The kids were there. We loved on her. Told her how much we appreciated her. And then she went to sleep. I don't have the expectation of ever seeing Kaya again. Because she's dead. She's not created in the image and likeness of God. She's not an eternal being. There's a differentiation between the animal kingdom and man, who was created in the image and likeness of God. There is a fundamental biblical difference. Kaya did not have a soul that would last forever.
I thought all dogs go to heaven.
That's a whole nother topic, yes, but for the sake of this conversation. But here's the thing. So we say, my wife is like, there's nothing that she plants that she doesn't kill. She I hope she doesn't watch this. Sorry, honey. That's why there's no plants in the backyard. She plants it, it's gonna die. I plant it, it's gonna live forever. I have a green thumb. I get that generationally from my mom, my grandmother, my great grandmother. Plant something, it grows. But Jessica would be like, "Yeah, all the plants in the backyard are dead." We'd use that phrase, right? Dead. So we okay, they're dead. What does that actually mean? We use a term, but what does it mean? It means that the life force within that plant is gone, and now that plant is decaying, returns back to the soil, and will give life to the same plant again. But we use that word, dead. My dog died. My dog is dead. What does that mean? Well, it means my dog is no longer with me, and that dog's body, the life is gone, that body is decaying, and dust to dust, ashes to ashes. Gone. Nothing left. But we say, my grandmother died. And I think death freaks us out because we use the term death in ways that aren't true. So when the Bible talks about death, like if we could take, what is the biblical definition of death? I think death only exists within the context of humanity, but is death the end of life? No. Death, if we look at it from a biblical concept, isn't the end of anything. It's the translation into an eternal state of being. Meaning, God said, you'll surely die if you sin. What does that mean? Does that mean you end like a plant or an animal? let's take a step back regarding faith and our decision to follow Jesus or not. Just take every human being. Does any human being cease to exist?
No.
Never. We don't. So in that sense, we don't die in the way we apply the term kind of universally, which I think is why it's confusing. No, death, no one dies in that context of like you're done and now you're just part of the circle of life. No, your life, death is not the end of your life in any context whatsoever from a biblical definition, which means when we think of death, we got to change the way we think of it because it's not the end, it's not an ending. For a plant, it's an end. For an animal, it's an end. And you can get all like metaphysical. Oh, well, it's just the new beginning because their particles are going into another particle and another particle, whatever. Like
my science teacher in grade school said, and it was kind of cool. It's
which is the circle of life concept.
He said nothing that is made can be unmade. Like it just turns into something else.
It just yeah. And in that sense, it's true. Okay, you know what? I like that. Let's just say that everything alive, everything living, whether it's plant, animal, not, it doesn't ever cease to exist, but it does transform into a different existence of some kind.
Different matter.
What makes humanity different is we don't translate into a different entity. We continue as we are.
In a different place.
In a different place. Which means that, like, when we think of death, like, it's the whole thing. Well, sin, it was through man's sin that death entered the world, so that Jesus, with wine, well, it had to have been something different because it couldn't. Well, that is an insane view of what the idea of death is. I say insane. We've all fall prey to it because we use the same word to describe multiple things that are totally different. When a plant dies and an animal dies and a human dies, totally different things. Again, we're just using the wrong word. Again, if we want to get really accurate, we can use the biblical term death, apply that to humanity, and define the context of it's not the end, it's the beginning of your eternal state. And then we can describe plants and animals some other way. Because I'm not even sure.
Well, that's what.
Yeah. Okay. So jump in.
That kind of goes to the crux of my question, and looking through it. So, in Genesis, obviously written in Hebrew, so he uses the Hebrew word for death, which is kind of cool because one of the definitions of that is to be killed or be put to death or to die prematurely. It's kind of cool, but like in Matthew 21, that I was that I asked where that came from, that word, when describing plants, it doesn't use the word death at all. It uses withers.
The fig tree withered.
But in almost every instance of plants, what we would say dying, it says withers, which is a completely different
Which
kind of
substantiates my whole idea.
Right.
Bro, we're working it out together.
Yeah. So like, obviously it's a Greek word.
No, it's totally English now.
Right. But I found that interesting where I was expecting other verses to be maybe, or in English translation of that to say be put to death, or the fig tree died. That's just how I summarize it. No, it says it withered. But in a lot of other verses, it uses that same word, withered. It doesn't ever use the word death when it comes to
like the same idea.
Yeah. So it's two completely different words, two completely
so
different
how
ideas.
Interesting that we're using the term death by and large in a non-biblical way. That's the essence of my premise. So I'm again, let's circle back.
Can I come from this from the other direction?
I don't know what that other direction is, Pope Creighton Vaughn.
If I'm understanding you correctly, would you say that this is kind of like if you were to talk to somebody and they were to describe a dog and a plant as having life the same way that you and I do? Because we use the word life. We use the word life for all of us, for everything.
That's what I'm saying. I don't think
not. Our lives are not.
And that kind of goes back
to our deaths are not.
That goes back to my original question: is where I
agree with that.
postulated that there's a different word or idea behind the death of an animal or human and plants. And I think in the ancient times, these ancient languages, there was a separation of, a dog dies. You can use the same word that you use for humans for an animal dying. But when it comes to plants, they often use the word like withered or dried up.
Well, you're making, like, I would be interested. Can you find an example in Scripture referring to an animal dying using the same word that then gets attributed to a human? Because my thesis here is that we use the word death for animals and plants and humans when that actually adds to confusion.
So it had to be in the Old Testament.
And again, hey, if you want to join this, if you want to do your own research, maybe we might not even reach the conclusion tonight.
I'm doing this live on air.
Yeah, we can.
Blue Letter Bible, which I think has been a sponsor.
Yeah, Blue Letter Bible. Yeah, absolutely.
It's really cool. Has that
we've sponsored them.
Yeah. Oh yeah, sure. I can't think of an instance off the top of my head
of an animal dying.
Anytime it's
sacrifices.
I don't know if it ever uses the word like dying.
Maybe Absalom, maybe his donkey uses the word die when he's talking to him. Do you want me to
that
die?
Is not Absalom, that is Balaam.
Balaam, not
but that's
Absalom.
That's in reference to
an angel killing the donkey.
Not the donkey, but
animal deaths are discussed in the Bible when it comes to sacrifices.
Sacrifice. I don't think there's one that's just
animal deaths. In a biblical perspective, animal death is often treated as a natural part of creation, especially post-fall, but it lacks the spiritual weight of a human death. Animals are part of God's creation, Genesis 1:20-25, and their lives are valued, but they are not described as having the same eternal soul or moral responsibility as humans. Key themes: sacrifice in the Old Testament. Animal death is central to the sacrificial system, Leviticus 1:7, where animals are killed to atone human sins, symbolizing
But does it say death?
Death.
It does.
Yeah, but I want to know the original word, because all the instances
And
that
wait,
I can
real
think
quick,
of, it's
and
sacrifice,
like,
not.
But let me add to the, if the only place that it is used for is for sacrifice, that adds even more, like that substantiates my argument even more, because what is the animal doing?
Dying for us.
It's not dying for itself.
Right. So Ecclesiastes 3:19-20 compare the fate of the animals and humans, noting both die and return to dust, but the humans have a unique spiritual dimension.
Ecclesiastes
Proverbs
what?
12.
I have Ecclesiastes 3 open in my Bible right now.
Ecclesiastes
3:19
Yeah.
through 20.
I'll read it. For what happens to the sons of men also happens to animals. One thing befalls them, one dies, so dies the other. Surely they have all one breath. Man has no advantage over animals, for all is vanity. All go to one place, all are dust, they all return to dust. Who knows the spirit of the sons of man, which go upward, the spirits of animal, which goes downward? Which, by the way, like, this is a completely fatalistic, non-biblical examination of life under the sun from Solomon. So he is making an observation, and again, chapter 3 I had opened because it's a death chapter. He's writing about death and this fatalistic outlook of like he opens. There's a time there to everything. There's a season, a time for every purpose under heaven. A time to be born, time to die, time to plant, time to pluck what is planted, time to kill, time to be healed. He goes down through like everything operates. I'm trying to find meaning in this system, and it looks like everyone just dies the same way. His conclusions at the end where he's like, nah, that's not how it all works. Like, so like we're walking through Ecclesiastes in a different way.
Yeah, if you've never read Ecclesiastes, he says a bunch of things that I don't think that he actually agrees with at the end of his life in Ecclesiastes.
Correct.
Because he is moving through a series of worldviews, including nihilism, hedonism,
altruism. Like he like gets into altruism. Like, let's be
the whole
benevolent.
gamut.
Yeah. For sure. The well, hey, there's a lot we can chew on this. Again, I'm just introducing an idea. Let me bring it home a little, and then we can carry it to another episode. My point bringing it up is that this saint of a woman that I had the privilege of seeing today, she might very well die. And when we use the word death, that carries such heavy connotations. I think if we can maybe try to get to what the Bible actually says is death, Paul would say, death has no power, has no sting, has no victory. What is death? for all of humanity, it's not the end of anything at all. It is an instance where you go from one reality to the next. And that
pause of physical function.
But that to me is like that, like when you're standing around a quote deathbed, like it's like this person is not going, like this person doesn't cease to be. They're about to enter a whole new reality that I'm not there yet. Or maybe I am. That's a whole nother topic. You know, we get to multiple dimensions, whatnot. But like my whole point, like we die, deathbed, loved ones around us, and we wake up and they're all already there. Like that idea. But there is again, I don't know how the world handles it, because it's depressing. I told my friends, so I don't want to share too much, but they have a relative coming into town to probably say goodbye that's agnostic. And I told my friend, because, you know, they were like, the wife made the comment like, when my mom gets healed, like she's not going to have any answers for that. Just like you, Zach, like there are no explanations apart from God. And I said, you know, that's 100% true. And if God wants to work that way, he can, but I should add in that Christians die differently than the world. And that is an equally powerful, unexplainable thing to someone that doesn't believe as well. And if your mother gets called home to glory, the way in which a Christian dies is much different and is an equally powerful testimony. And then my buddy jumped in and he said that when his father passed away, like the last 3 hours or so was nothing but him telling all the nurses how beautiful heaven was. And how he was describing all the things he was seeing, and like it's real, like don't doubt. Like it was like having, and apparently his dad never talked like that, but it was like at the end, you know, Christians die differently. And I guess that was my whole thought pattern driving home from kind of a, you know, my day got blown up in a beautiful way. Wouldn't have changed that for nothing. I love the family, and to be there, to be welcomed into the room was an honor, and I don't ever take that lightly. But it got me just thinking driving home of like, you know, do we? You almost want to say like maybe we should describe this differently. Like, hey, they're going home. They're being resurrected to new life. They're being transformed. Like we almost like want to like pull back into using some different terminology. But like if we just go with the biblical definition of death, like, hey, they're dying, because that's not the end. Like that's not what death means at all, especially within the context of the resurrection of Jesus Christ. You know what I mean? Final thoughts. Let's work the table. Let's go Spice Daddy back to C Money over there.
Yeah, I don't know how you can keep calling something one word when it's been defeated.
Yeah.
Like the instant death was defeated, the definition changed for those who believe.
But it's also still the same,
Right.
for those that don't believe, because they don't end either.
Right. That's true.
Which is, I think like part of the context, because you'll read the stories like people that are hardened atheists, vindictive, and like the horrors on their deathbed.
Yeah.
Where it's like hell's reaching up to bring them in. You can read those. You can Google those stories.
The last words of different people.
Yeah.
It's
because they're not dying in the way we think of it. They're moving to another place. You know, and there's this overlay. Like I don't want to go too deep into this, but anybody seen the Netflix show The OA?
Mm-mm. Parts of it, yeah.
You've never watched this. They should have kept it going. It was 2 seasons. You want to watch like the trippiest thing ever? That show was trippy. The OA. The idea of it was that when people had near-death experiences, they experience hallucinations and things. And I can say this for personally, that is a truth. Like when your body is either on heavy medication or you're deprived of oxygen or you're fight or flight, like the body, the brain will do some crazy things. I had incredibly lucid dreams as I'm at the verge of death. But the premise of the show was that near-death experience, like once you flatlined, but then you're brought back, like whatever happens there is actually a glimpse into yourself in another dimension. And so there's this scientist who's like trying to figure out how you can move between dimensions. So he's got this theory. So he's kidnapped people and he's taking them he's flatlining them and then bringing them back, studying what's happening. He's trying to learn how you can like gateway into other dimensions. Like it is, have you ever seen Being John Malkovich?
Yes.
Where like, what's his name? John Cusack finds a portal in the office where he like crawls through the hole and he's like in the mind of John Malkovich, like looking out of his eyes, like the actual actor, not playing a role. He's just himself. And you're like, that's the trippiest thing I've ever seen. This TV show, there's 2 seasons, totally like that, where you're like, what? Jess and I totally enjoyed it. I don't know if I'd really enjoy it as much now, but it was like, it was a thing. But like the idea, like again, what they're playing on is like, there's something that happens at our perception of death. And people talk about, like you find the books where 90 Seconds in Heaven or whatever, like the little kid dies in the car accident, is flatlined for 6 minutes, comes back and writes a book about heaven. You know, I doubt that. Paul was the only one we know died, probably went to heaven for a little while. And then he came back and was like, yeah, what I saw, I can't write because there's no human language that articulates it. So, you know, like, again, I don't know. I don't know how I'm landing the plane.
I mean, John?
Who?
You said Paul. I mean, John?
No, Paul got stoned outside of Iconium.
Yeah, that's true.
Paul went
John.
up and came back and said he couldn't write about it. John got taken to heaven for
And was told
revelation
to write
and
about
was
it.
told to write about it.
Boom. Nailed it. So, Dear Daddy, your thoughts?
I mean, I've been pronounced dead twice.
I was going to bring that up.
So
we got to talk about that next week.
It doesn't bother me. Like, it's not the greatest experiences of my life, but I have a severe peace with it. So much so that we were actually called when you were in your predicament and basically told that it was not looking good and you probably weren't going to make it. And we sat out on my deck and my wife and I had that discussion. She was like, well, you know, are you going to be sad if Zach passes away? And I was like, no, I'm going to be extremely happy for Zach. Bummed that he beat me to it and that I have to stay on this crappy planet full of lies and deceit and lust and all the disgusting things that exist here. But I would not be sad. I would be sad that Calvary's 316 probably wouldn't make it. Like, I don't think there's anybody else on this planet that teaches the way that you teach that could keep that going. Like, I would be sad that that would suck, but not sad that you passed away, because I knew what you're on to next.
I'm thankful for that, as long as that's followed with, and I would make sure your kids were good.
Yeah, I mean, that's what the church is.
Yeah.
You know,
I would have made sure Jessica and the kids were fine.
Yeah, the church family would have totally taken care of that. I don't have a doubt in my mind. But yeah, I mean, like, to wish somebody back to this
Right.
crap hole
I have that question
from heaven is
all
like,
the time when I think about Lazarus.
yeah,
Like,
Dude,
did he get the
yes.
short end of the stick?
Worst-
My goodness,
100%.
dude.
Worst deal. Worst deal on the planet.
You brought that up in church a couple
I've
weeks
talked
ago,
about it.
and I looked up the passage and I read through it. I'm like, what a crap deal! Like,
Dude, not
Man,
only
he was there for like 3 days.
Yeah.
dude was in heaven for 4 days. Like, I know we're long, but just I love thinking about the scene. So Lazarus gets sick, like so sick, like his sisters send for Jesus, which means that all the doctors, all that, falling short. don't know what to do.
Ain't good.
But listen, I've been real sick. That sucks in and of itself. Like, just your last human experience is being like that sick. And then you die. And you're like, I'm in paradise.
This
This is awesome. Dude's palling around with Elijah, Moses, Abraham. Probably now calling him Abe because they're bros.
They've been hanging for a while.
They've been
man.
hanging for a few days. Like they've got their pickleball date at 9:30 every morning.
Then
Like
you get zapped back down
by
to this.
4 days, but 4 days he's gotten his routine, and then out of nowhere, over the loudspeaker of heaven, it's like Lazarus.
You got to go back to hang out with your sisters.
And Lazarus is like, ruh-roh,
But then that,
come forth. And he's like, no. And like he starts like dematerializing as he's like going back.
Trying to crawl his way in.
And then he wakes up and he's like in swaddling clothes. Like he's a baby again coming out of the womb. Grown man is in clothes like, dude just went from glory to he's looking at the backside of a tomb. And the stone gets rolled away, and there's light. Does anybody come in to help?
Nobody has to walk out
And
himself.
then he hears you, come forth. He's like, dadgummit. He like tries to take a step, but he's like, my legs are wrapped up. So he's hobbling his way out. And then no one, like he can't undo himself. So Jesus then instructs the people like, hey, loose him so he can walk around. And then he's like, oh my goodness. I mean, they don't record his words. Because Jesus was his BFF. And I'm sure in that moment, he looked at Jesus and probably used a curse word.
It's like, what are you doing,
Like,
man?
are you serious?
Because you have to look at
what?
you have to look at Jesus and be like, you knew where I was.
no.
You
I got a
knew
thought.
where I was. You knew what I was doing.
I got a thought. So, you know, like when you're best friends with someone, you like tormenting them a little bit. Like you get some twisted joy, like really,
It's required.
like really screwing with them.
Yeah.
I don't know anybody that we do that with.
Right. So we're told that Jesus wept before he called Lazarus forth. What if it wasn't tears of sorrow? It's
like laughing.
He's busting a gut.
Joke's on you,
He's
dude.
like, dude,
He's gonna be so pissed.
do you know what's about to happen to you? Jesus is not, they're not, he's weeping because of sorrow. He's weeping because, like, he's pulled the biggest gag on his bro ever by letting him die. And now he's bringing him back from eternity. And then the dude comes out and, like, Jesus is like, hey, man, now they're going to try to kill you.
Oh yeah.
Because that's what happens. Like,
You know
it's
what,
not like, yay. It's
Lazarus'
like,
story.
nah.
He's
Lazarus'
like,
story.
John, you're never gonna believe the look on
Right.
Lazarus' face.
Lazarus' story, to me, correlates with that story you read about John, though, the Baptist. They both had opposite results,
Yeah.
but even in death, your life in Jesus, as a follower of Jesus, has purpose.
So did they had opposite results? Who had the better result? John did.
John.
100%. Because John didn't get called back to earth.
But what I'm saying is,
Because Lazarus is one of the few people, he's got to die twice.
right. But what I'm saying is,
dies again.
But both men were followers
would
of Jesus.
suck.
Both men were
He gets sick again and dies. He's like, I've been here.
both men were followers of Jesus, and they both died as a result of Jesus in some way or another.
Yeah.
And, but they both served a purpose, even though they had different outcomes.
100%. Again, what do you do when God doesn't fit your expectation? Lazarus is like, I'm finally home in heaven. And what happens? God calls him back to earth.
Had the ultimate expectation met.
Yeah.
and
And then was like, and that's why Jesus is weeping, because he's laughing hysterically. That should be a short in and of itself, which should, there's nothing that goes viral. Have you ever heard anyone preach that? I'm going to preach that passage differently, always moving forward. Why is Jesus
Oh, my
weeping?
goodness.
Because he's about to pull the greatest gag on his best friend
The greatest prank of all time.
of all time. Yeah. Letting your buddy die and resurrecting him back to
Yeah.
earth to be murdered.
That math is mathing.
Dude, that is,
That's very.
I would be weeping.
Oh yeah.
Like, Vinny, you idiot. You have to go through this again.
Welcome back.
Gotcha.
Joke's on you.
Chuck's on you. Okay, well, hey, Thanks for joining us with the Outlaw Radio Show. No way to end land the plane there, but if you're watching, check out the podcast. It gets released on Thursday mornings, Apple, Google, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasting. Be sure to like, subscribe, pass it along. If you are listening to the podcast, check out the live stream on Wednesday nights, 8 o'clock. Again, like, share, subscribe to our YouTube channel, which is outlawradio.live. Again, thanks for joining us. We'll be back here 8 o'clock next Wednesday, unless the Lord returns, and then we'll see you in heaven.